This is Stephen again from Taraxa, and this is our second AMA, weekly AMA, to give you an update on what we're doing here at Taraxa and also share some interesting information and tidbits regarding our project's history and progress. Okay, so one of the things that I think we kept hearing about, and I'll spend a few minutes talking about this, is this interesting history and how we actually how did the Taraxa project actually got started in collaborating with Japan's RIETI and actually eventually culminating in the authoring of the blockchain book, as well as bringing a keynote into the symposium. So I wrote an article about it, and people can read about it through the link on Twitter. But here I'll give a quick summary because so many people have asked about it. It was back in 2018 when the project was first founded. One of our early investors, Mamoru Tanya, is a very influential Japanese investor. He informed us that Japan's METI, which is the Ministry of Economy, Economy, Trade, and Industry, a subdivision of METI, which is called RIETI, which is the division, which is the research arm of METI, was very, very, very interested in this thing called blockchain, right? It was very new at the time. And at the head of RIETI, Yano-san, Professor Makoto Yano, wanted to find out more about blockchain technology and wanted to put together these small discussion groups. So, I was very honored to be invited as part of the one of the participants of these discussion groups. And it was, these discussion groups included many very interesting people from Japan, not just people within blockchain, not just experts and luminaries in blockchain, but also a lot of leading academics in economics, in cryptography, in law. So it was a very illuminating discussion. What was very interesting is that Yano-san had originally thought that this discussion group would run just for several times. And then he and RIETI would have a good sort of a preliminary understanding of blockchain, and that would be the end of it. But as these discussions went on, he thought that actually this blockchain technology and its implications to not just finance but also to industry, also to society at large, was actually much larger than he had previously anticipated. I think he especially liked the fact that Taraxa was talking about real world use cases, how blockchain can be leveraged to make everyday lives easier and to add value, right, to existing infrastructural networks. And so he turned, he thought that this required a more rigorous and systematic treatment, and that he thought that more people in Japan should hear about the benefits that blockchain could potentially bring to society. So he did several things then afterwards. So instead of just a few discussion groups, he lengthened the duration of these discussion groups. I think it was meant to be just a few, but I think it ran from most of 2018 into most of 2019 as well. So the discussion groups kept on going, and there were more people getting involved every single time. Second, he thought that since this required a more systematic treatment, so that all the notes were actually compiled during these meetings and carefully edited and compiled into a book. Right? I think in Japanese was called Next Blockchain. So the book was published in September of 2019. I think the English version came out probably like a year afterwards in 2020. And but the third thing is that in order to make sure that more people hear about the book and hear about the message of how blockchain could actually benefit society at large, Yano-san said that we needed to actually orchestrate a large symposium to fully make sure that this issue in this book got the right type of attention. So a blockchain, the next blockchain symposium was actually set up at Nikkei Hall in October 2019, and we had some very interesting keynotes from state officials, from METI. We had the head of Wire magazine from Japan. We had Fabian, one of the original authors of ERC20. We had, we have representatives from, major automakers in Japan, and then, yeah, we just had a lot of very, very interesting keynote speakers. And the audience was really great too, because it was made up of over 400 leaders from business as well as government. So it really, really got the attention that it deserved, and I personally was very honored to be one of the keynote speakers. So that's how really that came about, and it was very interesting. It allowed us an excellent opportunity to actually learn a lot more about Japan and meet a lot of very, very interesting people. And hopefully we did some good in helping to promote this message. Okay, so let me look at some of these. Let me look at some of these questions. So the first question that was asked is, when is Mainnet going to be live? Okay, I'm going to answer this one live. We actually want to propose a Mainnet candidate in the third quarter of this year. That's when our plan is going to be. And I do want to say that the difference between testnet as well, the difference between testnet and mainnet is really a spectrum, right? So we do have a relatively stable-ish testnet, which we will release very, very soon in an incentivized testnet program. And then we'll just keep on doing more stress testing. We'll keep on doing more security testing until we believe that, hey, this is actually, stable enough for us to start migrating the ERC20 tokens into the mainnet tokens. And that's sort of, the idea. So I wouldn't really say that quote unquote mainnet release is a specific point in time, but it's really a continuous spectrum of progress, right? So our goal is to have something that's stable enough by the third quarter of this year, so that we can start proposing a migration of our ERC20 into the into a native coin. So. All right, second question. You seem to have a lot of connections in Japan. How exactly did you get introduced to the president of RIETI? Oh, okay. So I think I might have answered some of that. Most of our connections in Japan came from our original investor, Mamoru Tanya, who is an extremely famous angel investor in Japan. We have some really good partners in Japan. One of my classmates, Chris Dai, actually has a development company in blockchain development firm in Japan called Risika. And they are working with lots of very, very interesting companies, building lots of interesting blockchain solutions, and are actively driving a lot of the partnerships, along with Taraxa in Japan as well. So we're very fortunate to have excellent investors, excellent friends and partners, and to give us exposure as well as partners in Japan. So. There's a rumor in the community that Terra is getting listed on Huobi. True. First of all, I cannot really comment on any sort of listing or pricing. That's in the purview of the foundation. I would just say that in general, I wouldn't put too much stock into rumors. I personally, this is just a personal remark, is that listing process is a very, very long process, and you don't know if you are listed until you are listed. So that's just my personal comment. What I can say is that we have been talking to a lot of these tier 1 exchanges, and we will continue to talk to them, to the foundation will, of course, and in our best effort to obviously give the community a lot more liquidity in our token. Okay. Except economizing the cost of transactions, what are other core benefits of decentralization? Can you name? How are those used in Taraxa applications? Economizing the cost of transactions. Actually, yeah, this is actually a very interesting question. So what are some of the core benefits of decentralization, right? So I think decentralization, essentially what it does is that I don't really think cost is really the primary benefit, right? because decentralized systems, typically speaking, have higher costs than centralized systems. Now, what is very interesting is that decentralized systems are really, really good at adding trust to otherwise actions or transactions or agreements between people that otherwise have very little trust, right? So adding that layer of trust is really what decentralized systems are really, really good at doing. Although decentralized systems are much more expensive than centralized systems have this problem of being able to cheat and being very opaque, right? So it's really, so the cost of trust that's actually enforced in centralized systems is very, very high, because people don't really trust each other, right? I mean, you have entities, you have organizations that have to communicate with one another and have to collaborate with one another, but there isn't sort of, but their incentives or economic incentives are often in conflict. So there's really no good reason to believe that anyone's telling the truth or anyone has processes or systems that are actually trustworthy, right? So the mechanisms that we have already built into our society today to enforce trust are very expensive, right? So that's why I think blockchain is very, very good at, really figuring ways out to lower the cost of maintaining trust between coordinating entities, right? So I think one of the core theses of our platform, of our network, is that we're trying to add trust into informal transactions, and that's a very, very broad statements, right? What are informal transactions? Well, it's basically whenever anyone works, whenever anyone or any entity coordinates with one another in executing any kind of work, right? It could be delivering a package, it could be running executing a bank account, it could be building a house, it could be whatever, right? It could really be whatever it is that people are coordinating on. And the vast majority of these types of informal transactions don't have any guarantees of trust on them, right? And blockchain, despite being a very expensive system, can actually add trust in a way that's much, much, much cheaper than any centralized systems could. So yeah, so fundamentally, if you want to figure out whether or not a blockchain related application is actually legitimate and it actually correctly leverages the advantages of the technology and the unique advantages of the technology, figure out what type of trust gap is actually closing, right? So that's really what I think blockchain technology's core use case is. Okay, what data markets create on the basis of this new blockchain economy do you consider most promising? Data markets. Well, I think we talked about, in one of the articles I actually wrote quite a bit on, what types of data actually works really well on blockchain. If you're talking about a data marketplace, you tend to run into a lot of problems with the vast majority of data that you could potentially want to trade or over blockchain or over any kind of system, right? So the core problem with trading data, I mean, just setting blockchain aside for a moment, the core problem of trading data, you have two core problems, one on the selling side and the other one on the buying side, right? So you don't really get any guarantees on the buyer side that the data is real, right? And everyone has a different definition of what real is, right? Because the buyer wants a specific type of data coming from a specific type of source, formatted in a specific way, et cetera, it comes with certain types of guarantees. There's very little. There's no way that you can guarantee that the data that you're getting is actually real, because data is digital; it can be fabricated, right? So it's very, very, very difficult for the buyer. It's almost impossible for the buyer to purchase data from sources that don't have off-chain guarantees, right? For example, they're buying data from a specific company registered at a specific place. So if the data turns out to be false or incorrect or different from what the buyer intended to purchase, then he can probably sue them, right? Take them to court. So the enforcement aspect of it is really missing. And it's very, very hard to tell whether or not the data you're buying is real. So number one, veracity of data for data markets is actually very, very, very hard to solve. It's a very hard to solve problem. We have all these fancy technologies that are floating around, especially in the blockchain space, but you can't, at the end of the day, you have to trust the counterparty that they're providing you with real data, right? So that's problem number one. The second problem is probably even worse than the first problem, is that there's no way to enforce forgetfulness, right? So what does that mean? Is that on the seller side, he sold data to this, to this person, right? To this person, entity, whatever. He doesn't really know who bought the data. Well, who is to say that that buyer won't turn around and resell that data, right? Because it's digital, right? So he can sell any copies of it. And you can't even tell who's reselling the data either, right? Because once again, data is digital. It can be manipulated, right? So you can try to hide it, put like little markers or hints inside the data if you want to. But all of that, if it's inserted by humans, it can be removed by humans, right? So so two problems, right? So number one is veracity of data. You have very little guarantees. The second is the second one is you cannot, there's nothing you can do about piracy. So we actually, at the beginning of our project, we actually spent a long time actually thinking about this problem, and we came to the conclusion that a generalized data market is not really very feasible. I mean, a lot of people have tried to create data markets way before blockchain. And blockchain doesn't really add any value to this, right? Because it can't tell whether or not the data is real. There's nothing it can do to tell whether or not data is real. Blockchain is a garbage in, garbage out system, like pretty much all systems. And there's nothing it can do to enforce forgetfulness, right? Once you have the data, you have the data. You can make any copies of it using 10,000 different identities, and there's nothing you can do. So it's very difficult to run a data market, especially one that's decentralized or anonymized. So that's a very, very, very hard problem. I don't think there are good solutions. All existing solutions require a high level of trust between people who are transacting on the marketplace, and that defeats the whole purpose of having a trustless platform, right? So unfortunately, the answer to your question is sort of a negative outlook, but we spent quite a lot of time thinking about this problem, and we couldn't really figure out why it doesn't seem to be a good solution to it. So what is the official market cap and coin supply? So we will so what we're doing right now is that we are working with websites like CoinMarketCap, CoinGecko to actually give them the information. Now, what they publish versus what we believe to be the right numbers might not be the same. So we're trying to figure out exactly what their standards are versus what we actually submit to them. By we, I mean the foundation, right? So we will have an update to that soon, we hope. But some of this is out of our hands because these platforms, obviously, they don't answer to us. They don't answer to us, right? We can only request that they update their information. We can't force them to do anything. So we are working with them. Yeah. Okay, Paul is asking basically the same question, which I've already answered. Okay, so Bao Zi is asking a question: who are Terra's main competitors? Okay, so the main competitors, it's a little bit difficult to define, right? I think I've gotten asked this question many times. So I think that a blockchain ecosystem is really defined. Its competitive advantage and its competitive hurdles are really actually defined by the type of ecosystem it intends to build up. So it's actually very application driven, right? How much network effect can you actually drive into your application use cases? How hard is it, and how expensive it is? Can you actually make it for participants to leave, right? So so this is actually this is the core competitive advantage. Now, if you're looking at things from that perspective, we actually don't see anyone on the market today doing what we're doing, which is tracking informal transactional agreements and data. So from that perspective, I'm not really sure who is our direct competitor. We don't intend for, like I said, we take a full stack approach to the development of our overall project. We looked at our layer one, in our applications, and anything that goes in the middle, right? You can call them layer two or whatever you can call them, batch processing, whatever. We looked at it as an integrated system, right? So we don't look at them separately, like, this is a separate offering. We look at an integrated solution. So from that perspective, I'm not really sure who else on the market is doing what we're doing. Yeah, so this is not really an attempt to dodge the question. I honestly don't know if anyone else is in the space that we are in. We specifically want to focus on something that other people have not really tried to solve, and it's a very, very large problem. And informal transactional agreements does fit that bill. Okay. When will staking be released? When will there be more opportunities to earn money? Staking is on our roadmap. So we're going to be releasing very soon a very short-term 90-day sprint to show you guys some of the more immediate large milestones that we're going to be hitting later this year. So please be on the lookout for that. Staking is part of it. I think staking will likely be released, I think maybe in the next 2 months or so. We do have a lot of the infrastructure built. We're doing a lot of testing, and we need to build up the front end user interface for a lot of the staking stuff. So yeah, so it's coming very, very soon. And obviously staking and fees and block rewards, they make up, they're critical to a functional true blockchain, right? So obviously before our mainnet candidate can be released, we do need to make sure that the staking part is actually correct. The initial staking mechanism will be a little slightly a little complex, because right now there's an ERC20 in circulation that's on the Ethereum chain. So we will be setting up a mirroring staking contract on Ethereum as well as on our own network. And there will be a temporary sort of a bridge, a relatively centralized bridge on a temporary basis to actually mirror what was staked on the Ethereum chain into our test network. Rewards will be calculated in exactly the same way as they would as if they were on the mainnet, so that we can actually get a good test going on. But yeah, so that's what's in the plans, and it's coming within the next 2 months. Okay, are you aware of RIETI's further work in blockchain innovation? Any other industry partners spun out of the 2019 symposium? So I think RIETI continues to be very interested in the space, and they continue to be they continue to be very, very interested in the space. We are actually in active talks with them to figure out what else we can do to actually drive awareness. Yeah, I mean, once we do get some clarity on that, we will tell the community about it. Partnerships spun out of the 2019 symposium. We were working with a lot of Japanese partners even prior to the symposium, and the symposium I think only cemented some of our reputations and collaborations. Yeah, I mean, once some of these partnerships actually bear some kind of fruit, we will of course inform the community. So. As a lawyer supporter of the Terra app, is now the time to buy Terra. We don't obviously give any guidance on with anything has to do with tokens. I think that would be market interference. So I can't really comment on that. I'm sorry. When Uniswap listing and when CMC and CoinGecko updates. We have been working with CMC and CoinGecko, on updating these numbers for a while now. They like I said, I don't know their internal processes. Seems to be going pretty slowly. We're keep pushing them to actually get these updated. I mean, if you guys know people inside CoinMarketCap and CoinGecko, the right people to talk to, we would love an introduction I guess the channels that we're going with seems to be slow right now. Uniswap listing. Okay, so the lawyers that the foundations are working with right now gave advice to the foundation that that before Taraxa's token become a mainnet token, a Uniswap listing is highly illegal because it's once again going to run into a territory of distribution of unlicensed securities per SEC's ruling. So that's the advice that the foundation got, and I think the foundation needs to wait until mainnet launch before we can consider any kind of Uniswap listing. Yeah, that's the legal advice that the foundation received. So, but besides the automotive industry, what other companies using Marinate do you have an update around Marinate? So Marinate is right now primarily, so the quick update on Marinate is that we're actually rewriting the entire application into a much more stable version. So previously we have been pilot testing our application platform with partners using sort of like a very prototypey kind of a version. So hopefully that after our rewrite, it will be much more stable and much more polished. So we're also developing a open API for Marinate so that other applications can easily integrate into Marinate's platform and start anchoring whatever it is that they want. We are actively building out integrations with some of the most popular baseline communication tools, right? Like you said, like WhatsApp, WeChat, Telegram, and we're also looking to Twitter as well. So we want to make sure that whenever informal transactional agreements are happening, we are in a position to actually capture them very, very easily and allow people to actually create these immutable records of who said what when. What other companies are using Marinate? Well, our initial partners are actually in the construction industry, working with change order management, right? So that's another industry that we're using. Our partner, which we will be announcing soon, they're in the automotive parts quality control industry, so we're pretty excited about that partnership as well. So we'll be announcing that very soon. Terra has so few people involved. Why not publicize such a good project? We have been publicizing, and we have been doing our best to get the word out using whatever we have in our means. I'm not sure why you think we're not publicizing the project. I would love to hear any kind of advice that you have regarding how we can do a better job at publicizing it. Yeah, once again, would love some advice. Yeah, please reach out to our admins inside our communities, and yeah, we would love to hear your suggestions on getting the word out about Taraxa. Thanks. Is Taraxa actively involved with anything in Japan right now? Yeah, I mean, we're actively involved with Unicast, like we announced last time, and we're actively involved in a few other projects. Yeah, we will be announcing those very, very soon. Is Taraxa same as Parsec and the graph? I'm not sure what Parsec is. Sorry, I apologize for my ignorance. The graph, I don't think we're the same as the graph, right? I think the graph, what it does is that it provides, as far as I understood it, it provides blockchain data from different types of blockchain ecosystems. And it uses a decentralized network to provide data feeds. It's sort of like an Oracle system, right? For different types of blockchain ecosystems. And we don't do that. So we're really nothing like the graph. I'm really not sure what Parsec is. Sorry about that. I'll do some research and figure out, are we at all similar to them? But my guess would be no, because I haven't really found anyone doing anything remotely like what we're doing. You wrote a dedicated chapter on IoT. Is IoT still the primary focus for Taraxa? Well, IoT is one area of focus for Taraxa. I wouldn't call it the primary focus of Taraxa, only because it's anything hardware related spreads very, very slowly. So we need to be very cognizant about driving the fastest adoption that we can do. So we always said that Taraxa is here to track informal transactional agreements, and whether or not those transactional agreements and data are generated by people or machines or whatever. So we're always going to have a foot in the IoT space, but I would say that because of hardware's nature, right? Because we have an integrated solution for our IoT offering, Helio, it's going to go actually a lot slower than any kind of pure software solution that we offer. So yes, we are still involved in IoT, but it will progress, I think, slower than our pure software solutions. And that's not because we're not focused on it. That's not because there are no customers for it. It's just that hardware is just like 10 times slower than software. That's just the fact of life. We definitely think the IoT solutions are definitely the right area to be looking at and to be focused on. Yeah. How does capturing informal business agreements change the way people do business? Okay, so this is actually interesting. So we believe that the ability to capture and actually make informal agreements highly verifiable can actually give businesses a lot more operational data based upon which they can make much better decisions, right? So I think this goes back to maybe the first AMA that I did, which I'm sorry I didn't record. We are recording this one, so I won't make the same mistake again. The larger organizations, more complex projects that involve a lot more stakeholders, they actually have a very hard time getting primary data, right? Getting data that are market data that's very, very close to what's actually happening in the world, in the marketplace right now, right? If you're a very, very small team, everyone's very close to the market and they can act very quickly on that information because they have observed a lot of these patterns firsthand. So they trust that information because they themselves witnessed it or they were participants in it. If you have a much larger organization or a larger project, lots of stakeholders, then most people are not going to be in direct contact or directly participating in the market-driven information. So they're not first-hand observers. And therefore, that information, if others are to believe them, right, to trust that information, they need validation. They need validation. And most of the time, that data is not even captured, and much less it's not verifiable either. So that's what's leading to really these large organizations, larger projects, they're basically starved of high quality first-hand market information. And that's why they react so slowly and they fail to innovate, not because of anything else other than the fact that, because the fact that they're large, because they're not, most people are not really, don't really have access to first-hand market information. They fail to innovate and they fail to react in a timely manner. So being able to enable, the tracking, the capturing, and the verification of highly informal agreements makes it very, very, very easy for these businesses to get access to all that data that they did not have access to before. So yeah, it makes their business go much, much, much better, much more smoother. They can react to market forces much more quickly. Yeah. Will there be token burns and staking to reduce circulation? Yeah, so staking is coming up, like I said before. Token burns, we have been investigating some of the latest academic papers that talks about economic models in fee burning. So yeah, we will be doing a write-up about what our thoughts around that topic will be. But yeah, it is something that we're seriously considering. There's an inflationary force that comes with staking because the yields are generated out of inflation. There also probably needs to be a deflationary force to balance that out a little bit. Marinate and Helio app, are they unable now? I'm gonna guess that they meant usable now. So Marinate is usable right now. Helio, unfortunately, we can't release that to the public because, like I said, our business collaborations require NDAs. So we've only shown screenshots, but we can't really release that to the public yet. And this is this sort of leads to a broader point, is that I think in crypto, everyone expects everything to be 100% transparent all the time. But as soon as you actually start working with real world businesses, the vast majority of these collaborations are under NDA, and you can't really disclose the details of them. So all of the partners that we have right now working with Helio, that we can't really release that application to the broader market until we work something else out with our existing partners. But Marinate is usable right now. You can go check it out, marinate.io or app.marinate.io. You can check it out. You can send an email to post@marinate.io to actually anchor your email. Email is one of our first integrations when you're emailing other stakeholders in the same email chain. So you can check it out. It's still slightly buggy. We're doing a complete rewrite. Hopefully we'll fix all the bugs very, very soon, and we'll unveil a new version of that to the community very soon. Okay. You wrote a dedicated, so I already answered this. Question. Yeah. Okay. All right. So it looks like that's those are all the questions. Oh, there's one more. Okay, so last question. From MVIPV. See, expand a bit on what the primary source of income for Taraxa is. So the idea is really to create independently economically viable application platforms, right? So we actually do want platforms like Marinate to become independently viable. So all these application platforms will be running on a SaaS model, right? I think we want to actually run them on a SaaS model, and people pay the platform a certain amount of money in fiat, and that's it. I mean, that's how these application platforms are going to become independently viable, economically viable. Yeah. That's pretty much it, right? So you need to actually make these applications profitable on their own, and that's really the first step. The second step is that we actually want to use the fact that these application platforms are useful and profitable on their own to attract more developers into actually using our underlying API system. So that's only going to expand our customer base much larger. The eventual goal is, of course, to really make sure that informal transactions can be very easily captured and embedded into every single conceivable application. Before you can do that, you have to now prove that, hey, this is actually useful. People are willing to pay for it. So that's really a very simplified business model it's a very standard SaaS business model. Okay. Okay, cool. So we've hit our half-hour mark, and thank you everyone for your great questions. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.